Welcome back to Vacation Bible School. This is night number 2. We are so glad to have you back with us. We had a really good lesson last night. We have a great lesson tonight. And I know you're probably thinking, why is Miss Kim wearing this crown? Well, guess what? I'm claiming my crown. I'm being a leader. I'm doing God's work. So I'm claiming my crown. I hope you like it. It even kind of dingles, little diamond here just kind of moves a little bit. So I'm claiming my crown. I'm doing God's work. So let's kind of recap about last night since we're back tonight. Before we jump into the second night, let's recap what we talked about yesterday. So remember yesterday's lesson, we talked about John Lewis and standing up for his purpose and how he let God use him to make change. Even in the sight of adversity, he still made change. He stood up for what he believed in, and he was a leader. And we know that God always calls leaders, but sometimes it's not necessarily pretty. Sometimes it's not easy. A lot of times it's never easy. It's hard. It's hard being a leader. But God gives us what we need in order to take his word and to share it and be kind and to smile even when we don't feel like it, because sometimes being a leader may be just smiling and giving someone a friendly hug. So we talked about John Lewis last night, being a minister, doing the sit-ins, marching with Dr. King. I don't know if you remember, but what were the key words last night? Do you remember? That's right, endurance and zeal. And so John Lewis, he endured a lot. He endured a lot for slavery, and not just slavery, but civil rights. So that was last night, and the lesson was a model for leadership. So tonight, we're going to move on. And tonight's lesson is leadership in crisis. What does that make you think of? Leadership in crisis. Yeah, okay. What else? What else does it make you think of? So that's awesome, because tonight's keywords are courage and strength. So I'm going to open up with our Bible verse, and let me read it to you. For if you keep silence at such a time as this, relief and deliverance will rise for the Jews from another quarter. But you and your father's family will perish. Who knows? Perhaps you have come to royal dignity for just such a time as this. Then Esther said in reply, Go, gather all the Jews to be found in Susa, and hold a fast on my behalf, and neither eat nor drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my maids will also fast, as you do. After that, I will go to the king, though it is against the law, and if I perish, I perish. That is Esther chapter 4, verses 14 through 16. So let's talk a little bit about what Esther was doing in her leadership of crisis. So sometimes we know that God puts us in situations and we have to take a stand. Sometimes it may be in school and you might witness someone doing something not so nice to another friend of yours. Sometimes you might see someone being a bully. So in times of leadership, we take a stand. Even if it doesn't seem like the popular thing to do, it is what God would want us to do. And sometimes, and even I know it can be difficult to take a stand and to speak up for others. So even in doing so, maybe what God wants you to do is to go tell someone else so that person can help that person. But still, you're taking a stand because you're speaking on behalf of a friend or a classmate or sometimes even someone you don't know, but you're speaking up and giving them a voice. So that is also having courage, and it's having strength to be able to do that. So God places us in situations where he wants us to take a stand. He puts us in circumstances because he knows that as a leader, for him during a crisis, and if we believe in him, that we can do this. We can make the right decisions. So let's talk a little bit about Esther. So Esther was to marry a king. Esther was a Jew. And when she married this king, she was going to become a queen. So what she found was that the king had put someone in charge. And even though Esther was a Jew, that wasn't necessarily the norm back then. Her uncle, Mordecai, had refused to bow down to the king and the king's right-hand man. It made his right-hand man, Haman, which is his name, very angry. So angry, in fact, that he went to the king and asked for all the Jews to be killed. All of the Jews. Can you imagine that? The king trusted Haman's decision and his judgment and gave him the authority to kill all of the Jews. Mordecai sent a message to Esther telling her to go before the king and beg him to stop this, beg him to not kill all of our people. Esther thought about this, and she knew what she had to do. She went before the king and invited him to feast. She would reveal Haman's plot to kill her because she also was a Jew. The king spared her life and agreed to come to the banquet. At the feast, Esther explained that Haman had plotted to kill her and her people. This enraged the king. He put a stop to the plan, and he put an end to Haman. He hung Haman and saved Esther's people. God still places people in situations to be leaders for change. Claudette Colvin was a person who, in 1955, during the peak of the Jim Crow laws, decided to sit down for what she thought was right. As an African American standing on a crowded bus with 3 others, she was ordered to continue to stand, but she sat down. She sat down and she refused to let the other white passengers sit in their seats. She refused to give in and allow hate to win. She was arrested and taken to jail, where she was later bailed out by her minister. In 1956, she and 3 other women testified in federal court about what had happened and the segregation in Montgomery, Alabama. The Supreme Court ruled that the bus segregation was unconstitutional, and they won. God wants us to be leaders for positive change during times of crisis. He has empowered all of us to stand up for what is right, and he promotes his love when doing so. So Claudette Colvin stood up and she made change, even for people that came after her. Can you imagine what it must have been like to sit down on that bus when she knew that she had all of these white passengers who wanted to sit in her seat and she refused? Can you imagine how excited, how anxious, how worried she may have been? But it didn't stop her. It didn't stop her for being a leader for change, because she stood up for what she knew was right. And she knew it was unconstitutional. It wasn't right. We're all created equal. So, what does that mean for you? What does that look like? What does it mean to be a leader in crisis? Because this is what she did. She was a leader in crisis. Esther was a leader in crisis. Can you imagine the strength and courage it must have taken Esther to go and tell the king that his right-hand man was going to kill all of her people, someone that he trusted wholeheartedly? The courage, the faith that must have taken. Could you have done that? Something to think about, right? So I'm going to ask you these questions and something for you to think about. Why is it so important for us to recognize when God puts us in bleak situations or situations that just seem like are so awful, like I can't survive, I can't do this? Why do you think it's important for God to put us here? What do you think? Is it because God wants us to be a part of change? Is it because God knows our heart and he knows what we have the courage to do and the strength to do? Because God has empowered all of us to be leaders of change? How God used COVID to pave the way for other civil rights activists like Rosa Parks? Did you think about that? So other things to think about. We know how negativity and negative that racism is. We know it still happens today. We still see it. It's all around us. Some of you may even have been victims to racism. You may have seen others be unkind to a family or friend. But we have to put God's plan in first. We have to put his plan and his purpose in mind. We have to keep that in mind. And how all of these things that we're seeing, how it affects God's kingdom. How can we be leaders in crisis, in fighting racism every day, or fighting some circumstance every day, and injustice every day? How can we be leaders? It takes courage. And do you have courage? I know you do. Right? Think about a time that you may have stood up for someone, or a time that you may have even had a voice for yourself. You stood up for yourself. That takes courage. So sometimes, we have to empower ourselves so that we can be better people. So if we can help ourselves, we can help others. That's also God's way of working through us. So I want to encourage you to continue to trust what God is doing for you. The lessons that you learn, the things that you see every day. Trust that God is working in you to be a leader, because that is your gift. And God's direction when we are faced with a problem, how would God want us to handle it? And that how others will look at you when you're in the midst of a problem, and how you rise above it. And I also want to encourage you to be leaders and face adversity. Now, sometimes that's not easy to do. And I don't want you to think because there's a circumstance that may arise that you feel like, oh, I didn't do the right thing, or maybe I didn't do the right thing. That's okay. We learn from it, we move on, and then we know how to handle it when it happens the second time. Or even maybe sometimes it's just sitting back and listening and thinking, what could I have done different? I know what God can do for me. I know that God lives within me. I know that I am a leader. I know God has given me that strength, that faith, and I am a child of God. So what is your crisis may be? Whatever it is, whatever your crisis may be, how can you overcome it? How can you put your courage forth? So think about that for a second. How does it feel to be a leader in crisis? It's scary, I can tell you that. It's not necessarily popular. Sometimes people may think that you are a little weird for doing it. But does any of that matter when you know that you're doing God's work? None of that matters. So I want to challenge you to continue to be leaders, continue to be kind to others, continue to help others when they are having a problem, offer a word of encouragement. And if you feel that, hey, I don't know what to say, then maybe you might need to talk to an adult, talk to your pastor, talk to Reverend Ashford, Reverend Quick, talk to me and some of the other youth leaders. If there are things that you want to talk about how to handle, to be a better leader. That's what we're here for. This Vacation Bible School this week, as I said, we've got some dynamic topics. Wearing my crown. I am wearing my crown for God. So this is a process, and we're going to keep talking about this even after Vacation Bible School is over. But we want you to know that you are a leader. However you think that may look, no matter what, you are a leader. You have a divine purpose and a gift that God has given to you. So let's explore that as we continue through Vacation Bible School. I hope that you will join us for our next and final night, tomorrow night. And we've got another dynamic topic that we're going to talk about as being Christian leaders and leadership and being wonderful people. So join us tomorrow. Maybe you might want to come in person. We're going to play some games tomorrow. We're going to have fun. But most importantly, we are going to talk about this wonderful week that we've had and reflect on some positive things and things to move forward. So have a good night. Can't wait to see you guys tomorrow. Bye-bye.